Ever since Disney's very first feature film, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, the Disney princess archetype has firmly embedded itself into popular culture. But just like with all things that stand the test of time, changes have been made to that mold over the years. And while most believe that is for the best, many have noted that in the 2010s there was another noticeable shift in how Disney princesses were written. And I don't really know if it was a good shift. Because it seems that what were once known as dignified, regal characters have been turned into parodies or caricatures of those earlier princesses. And while it's most definitely fine to show children that it's okay to be different, or that not having the best social skills doesn't automatically make you a bad person, I just believe that they quickly took this idea or message too far. And today, I'd like to go over where specifically Disney has been going wrong with this format. And spoilers for any number of Disney movies will abound. So in case there's something you haven't seen but would like to, you might just want to be on the lookout for that. And also, I will not be bringing up Disney's Wish or its main character in this video. Okay, so to start at the beginning, which is definitely the best place to start in a case like this, let's take a look at the three Disney princesses that were released during Walt Disney's lifetime. And that would be Snow White, Cinderella, and Aurora respectively. And as is widely well known, all three of these women were very regal in nature. Though that's not necessarily as true as some people believe, as all three of them definitely have their moments of humanity and relatability. Like for example, Snow White refuses to feed the seven dwarfs until they've washed their hands, and Aurora honestly acts more like a teenage girl who just met her ideal crush than most would like to admit. Heck, she even pulls off the classic teenage move of using a loophole in her guardian's rules in order to see him again. And don't even get me started on Cinderella, because as I explained in further detail in my video on the movie, which you can find a link in the description to, behind that seemingly passive face is actually a deeply frustrated woman who somehow manages, through her strength, compassion, and willpower, to keep her mouth shut in the face of abuse. Now, what's my point with all of this? That despite all three princesses here acting like stereotypical ladies and having a lot of grace to them, they still act human. They just happen to do it in a very dignified manner. But I'll get back to that particular point a little later. Now, starting with Ariel, as is widely well known, Disney started trying to make their princesses more relatable and let them have more agency in their own stories. And the thing about Ariel is, even though she most definitely has her strange moments, they aren't what defines her character. In the end, she still carries over quite a bit from her predecessors in the way she's presented. And the same goes even more so for Belle. Despite being extremely feminine and not physically strong, she proves herself to be absolutely invaluable in those same qualities. In other words, Belle is arguably the best aspects of the Walt Disney era princesses, always having an air of grace around her, but never being afraid to take the initiative if she believes it necessary. Basically, despite her appearance, she is by no means a pushover, as Gaston learns the hard way. And this would also carry over into Jasmine as well, because once again, despite a sheltered existence and not being physically imposing, she's not afraid to go out and get what she wants, or make her opinion known when she's upset. And due to her carrying grace and dignity in all situations she's put in, even when reduced to Jafar's slave, one can't help but feel infinite respect for her. Now next we have Pocahontas, and this is where I believe a further change started to occur, because her quirks and strange qualities are heavily played up both to show how she's different from everybody else, and to show why she would be much more open-minded to speaking with an outsider than the rest of her village. So at least in this case, her behavior is justified by the narrative, and just like the other Disney princesses before her, she still manages to be graceful even with that more unconventional streak to her. And then Disney would apply this even more strongly with Mulan, where her clumsy and awkward nature is a major part of her character. But the difference here is that she also suffers extreme consequences for that behavior. Because while that is a part of her, the point is that she can also be more than it. Basically, the point of Mulan is that she can move beyond her clumsy nature to be something better, and her quirks aren't there just for the sake of being quirky. And then we have Tiana, who simply harkens back to the likes of Belle and Jasmine a lot more. Because frankly, there isn't a self-made person in the world who wouldn't relate to this woman. All of her actions and behavior are extremely justified in her movie. And finally, we get to Rapunzel, and this is where the recent shift started happening. Because Rapunzel is presented in a way similar to Mulan, being eccentric, a bit odd, and clumsy, though not to the same extent as Mulan. But the difference between Rapunzel and future Disney princesses is that just like Mulan, these quirks aren't what defines her. That would be her naive compassion. And for one example of that, take when she confronts the thugs in the Snuggly Duckling. Because she asserts herself, all of her quirks and clumsiness in that moment are gone. Instead, she more comes across as extremely naive and inexperienced in her attempts to reason with them. And again, this does make sense as she'd interacted with a grand total of 2 people in her life up until that moment. It's just that luckily for her, the thugs find her innocence endearing, to the point that they're willing to open up to her about their own dreams. So once again, it's the fact that Rapunzel, in her innocence, was being compassionate to them that allowed her to get out of that situation. So simply put, just because she's odd doesn't mean that she doesn't carry an air of grace with her like her predecessors do. But then with Anna in Frozen, it was like Disney just took Rapunzel's personality and amplified her quirks all the way up. Now, as I've said before, and I'll say again, I'm actually a fan of Frozen, and I do think it's a good movie. But I do agree that they might have overdone Anna's eccentricities. Because there's a major difference here between what was done with Anna and Rapunzel. As I just went over, with Rapunzel, her quirks aren't treated as her defining feature. She's shown to be quite capable of knowing exactly what to say when the situation calls for it, and in the end always carries an air of dignity to her. In fact, that's even why there's something of a running gag of Rapunzel desperately trying to act more confident and dignified, because it's clear to everybody that she doesn't need to. She already has plenty of dignity and grace, and just because she occasionally slips up or gets enthusiastic doesn't mean she loses it. And tying this into what I was saying before, that's the common thread all the other Disney princesses have that Anna does not. Dignity. Because unlike the likes of Mulan and Rapunzel, who just act a bit weird but most definitely still have their feminine grace, Anna is treated like a complete punching bag by the narrative, to the point that the audience might like her, but find it hard to respect her. Because if her own narrative doesn't, why should the audience? Again, going back to Rapunzel, the narrative respects her and allows her to be quirky with dignity and have a reason for her to behave a bit odd. With Anna, however, the narrative only seems to want you to like her because she's eccentric and is constantly facing misfortune. And once again, as a result, it can make the audience find it a little hard to take her seriously. Now, I know you might be thinking, but what about somebody like Eugene from Tangled? He's constantly treated as a punching bag by his movie's narrative, and he still manages to earn the audience's respect. And that is very true. But the thing is, the characters are also completely different. Because Eugene is portrayed at first as an arrogant thief who betrayed his partners. So as a result, all of the humiliation he goes through afterwards feels deserved, and not like it's just coming from the narrative wanting him to suffer. And because of his introduction, he has to earn the audience's respect, as unlike Rapunzel, he doesn't automatically have it. And tellingly, the better he gets throughout the movie, and the more he starts to earn the audience's respect, the less he starts getting pushed around and his suffering stops being played for laughs. Basically, with Eugene, there's a progression in how he's treated by the narrative. When he starts out as a jerk, the narrative makes him pay for it. And once he's suffered enough, it stops treating him as somebody deserving of punishment. With Anna, however, the movie pretty much makes a constant laughingstock of her until her life is literally in danger at the climax. And once again, while her constant quirks and clumsiness may make the audience like her, it can be hard to actually respect her because the narrative allows her to have exactly zero dignity. But moving on from that, we have Moana, who I believe doesn't suffer from this problem quite as badly. Because while she does have her moments, she, unlike Anna, is able to keep an air of something resembling dignity to her, even if it still feels like the narrative takes it a little far at times. But what also helps her case is that it feels like Maui would treat anybody the way he treats Moana. In other words, it's less about Moana not having dignity and more about Maui just not treating anybody respectfully, period, that causes most of Moana's problems. Because I'm pretty sure he'd even treat the likes of Jasmine or Belle the same way he treats her. So it's not really about personal dignity when it comes to that. Is it still a great look for her? No. But unlike Anna, at least there's something of an in-story reason for some of the humiliation she goes through. And next we have Raya. And let me just save time by saying, I've made it no secret that I think they completely screwed up this movie. And Raya's characterization is no different. She goes from acting like she's in a slapstick comedy to the most serious drama ever. Her personality is all over the place. So, needless to say, her more quirky and clumsy moments don't really do her any favors when it comes time to take her seriously. In fact, in some instances it downright doesn't make sense. But before I go into another rant about that, we have Mirabel. Now, just like with Anna, let me take a moment to say that I like both Mirabel and the movie she comes from. But that being said, that doesn't mean I don't have some issues with it. Because when it comes to the quirky and clumsy routine, Mirabel gets it even worse than Anna. There isn't more than a scene or two that goes by before something bad is happening to her or she's making some kind of strange face. And yet, the narrative is able to somehow not make her come across as a complete loser before it's over. But the point is, once again, Mirabel is missing that element of basic dignity to her that most of the other Disney princesses have. And I do think it reflects negatively on her character because of it. Now, of course, there is also the question of why Disney has been going in this direction in the first place, and it seems to come from a desperate desire to make their princesses less feminine and more quote-unquote relatable. Christian Belle even outright said that she pushed for Anna to be so awkward and undignified for that exact reason. But here's the thing. Making stupid faces and tripping over things doesn't make somebody relatable. Because as a man who's written books, I can safely say that stripping a person of their basic dignity isn't how to get people to relate to your characters. That's usually something that's reserved for the villain's sidekick, specifically because the writer wants you to laugh at them. Because they're serving the bad guy, the writer doesn't want you to respect them and thus have no problem making a laughingstock of them. Heck, sometimes they'll even do this to the villain themselves as an appropriate comeuppance for them. And even in times where the hero sidekick is played that way, it's simply for comic relief, and not to mention, generally they're not exactly characters that need to be respected. Sometimes they'll come through at the end, at which point they stop being played for laughs once they earn the audience's respect. But the point is, what they're doing here with these main characters is not a good look for them. My point is, the only characters that should be stripped of their dignity and have it be played for laughs are characters you don't want the audience to respect. You shouldn't be doing it to your main character in a vain attempt to make them relatable, because not only is the audience not going to be able to take them seriously, but frankly they don't find the slapstick situations they get into relatable, because stuff like that just doesn't happen to people in real life. And besides, who is to say that older Disney princesses weren't already relatable? As I went over before, even the Walt Disney era princesses definitely had their moments of relatability. Some of them a bit too much, as a matter of fact. And then in the Disney Renaissance, just because they acted feminine or couldn't physically take part in the action, that didn't mean people couldn't relate to them or respect them. For example, when Jasmine makes it clear she's not a prize to be fought over, it makes both the audience and Aladdin respect her even more, because she's doing exactly what many people of all races and genders have to unfortunately do sometimes. Stand up for their basic human rights. That's relatable, because that is a real thing people have to go through, if not usually to the same extent as her. And that's not even getting into Tiana. Seriously, she might just be one of the most relatable Disney princesses ever, and she never has to humiliate herself to do it. And as I touched on earlier, even when the clumsy nature of the characters is played up, like in the cases of Mulan and Rapunzel, the point is that they can be more than those shortcomings. It's the fact that they aren't ashamed of their quirks, but also prove that they are much more than them. I mean, Mulan dresses up like a man and is bullied constantly, but ends up one of the most respected warriors in all of China. She didn't do that by stumbling her way to victory. She did that because she was that determined and overcame her problems. My point is, unlike later Disney princesses, her suffering, eccentricities, and ultimate triumph are presented in a way that the audience can relate to, if once again not to such an extreme. And that's not even getting into the fact that Disney doesn't seem to consider that maybe little girls, who are the primary target of Disney princesses, let's face it, don't want to find princesses overly relatable. Because as I had to have pointed out to me, when Frozen Mania was all the rage, Elsa got a lot more love from little girls than Anna did. And this despite the fact that Elsa is portrayed as troubled, while Anna is much more free-spirited by comparison. Now sure, the ice powers making her cooler, no pun intended, no doubt have something to do with that. But I also think a major reason for that is because they can relate to her better. Elsa is an introverted, shy, but still compassionate and playful woman who nonetheless carries a huge amount of dignity and grace with her no matter what she's doing. Girls like that. Girls relate to it. Even Rapunzel is a noted favorite among little girls, and that's because of how approachable she is. Think about it. She's a plucky ball of sunshine who's nice and understanding to everyone. What wouldn't a little girl, or anyone else for that matter, like about her? And this applies to pretty much all the other pre-Frozen Disney princesses as well. I know Jasmine and Ariel were other particular favorites among little girls, along with the likes of Cinderella and Snow White, two princesses most people generally deem not as relatable. But as I said before, just because they're feminine doesn't mean they're automatically badly written. Because here's the thing. I don't like giving real-world commentaries, but there's just no other way for me to get this point across. Most men are to a degree masculine, and most women are to a degree feminine. That's just the way it is. Now sure, most men may end up liking certain feminine things, and most women may like certain stereotypically man things, and that's okay. But at most people's core, stuff of their own gender is going to be more appealing to them. So no matter how much some people try to deny it, little girls are going to like feminine princesses for that exact reason. Because they're feminine. They relate to them. They like watching them. It's no different than little boys watching the Transformers and liking Optimus Prime because he's masculine. Just like with the Disney princesses for girls, he's a man that any boy would look up to and gladly be friends with if he were real, and want to be more like. What I'm trying to say here is, Disney princesses were always relatable to little girls, if some more than others. There's no problem with wanting to try something new and different with them, but stripping these characters of their basic dignity is most definitely not the way to go about it. Okay, I think I've rambled on for long enough. So now I'd like to hear your guys' opinions. Do you believe that Disney's habit of making their princesses overly awkward, quirky, and clumsy is misguided and coming at the expense of their dignity? Or do you love the direction they've been going in and think that I'm completely wrong? Please feel free to let me know in the comments below. And remember, you don't have to agree with this video just because you watched it. You are entitled to your own opinion and can think everything I've said is completely backwards if you wish. And thank you all for watching. I really, really appreciate it. And I hope to see you all next time.